Is your guild struggling to achieve 50 attempts remaining in Trial of the Crusader? Have you given up on your dream of a 272-bis cloak? Well, close eBay because we don't need to buy our way to 50 attempts remaining in the tribute chest. There are some really quick and easy things you can do to ensure your group gets 50 attempts far more consistently in that max gear. I'll give you the tips the top guilds are taking advantage of, as well as tools to analyze raid performance and take your clears to the next level. Let's jump into the 5 ways to guarantee success with the tribute chest in Trial of the Crusade. First, we need the basics though. When you go into Trial of the Crusader heroic mode, you have 50 attempts to kill the bosses. More attempts remaining, more bonus gear like the regalias for the 258 tier sets. As a general rule, most guilds want to have at least 45 attempts remaining to maximize all the possible loot. Of course, that's just a consolation prize though. The real dream is the 272 item level cloaks from wiping 0 times and having 50 attempts remaining. So here are the 5 things I've learned that'll make your runs wipe free. Number 5 is to do 10-mans a lot. Everyone in your raid should be doing 10-man hard modes every single week. Getting more reps in for mechanics is really huge, especially for your tanks and healers. I found that 10-man runs really teach me the mechanics a lot better than those hectic 25-man raids. This is another reason why TOC is the best phase for alts. The more alts I have, the more attempts I get at TOC, and the better I get from all the different roles. One cool way to build up reps on the most dangerous part of the raid is the Anubarak simulator. If you can manage to do the minigame with 0 deaths, let me know in the comments because it's actually hard. I know when I first had to deal with the burrow phase, I messed it up immediately, but after getting a lot of practice, it's one of the easiest parts of the raid for me. The number 4 tip to get those 50 attempts remaining is to bring an extra healer. If Ulduar was the phase to cut out healers for DPS checks like Hodir and Yogg 0, TOC is really the opposite. With almost no exceptions, you should run at least 5 healers per fight and even up to 6. This is the time to respec a DPS to healer, whether an extra paladin or another druid or a shaman. In my first week, my paladin had really bad gear and I was struggling to output enough HPS on twin Valkyrs to get through the fight. Once we added an extra resto druid though, the fight was a complete joke by comparison. Also, a bonus healer on a Anubarak is always worth it, even if you get an extra burrow phase. Losing penetrating cold targets is a way bigger problem than having one less DPS. My number 3 tip is to not overlook any fights. I'm usually at fault for this, but the second the Northrend Beast fight starts, I usually start joking around and distracting the raid. But fights like Northrend Beast are extremely easy to wipe on. A fun and joking time could really go south if you lose your tank or all your DPS on the Dread Scale and Acid Maw fight. You should really treat every fight seriously, and that means things like clear communication, full buffs and consumes, healer assignments, positioning assignments, everything. This also applies to things like Resist Blast on Anubarak Phase 3 and Mighty Frost Protection potions too. We use a macro that uses all the correct potions as well as removing Fortitude, and this makes the phase a lot more manageable. Also, more on the topic of getting serious. I know DPS already swapped their glyphs for a lot of different fights. There's really no reason healers shouldn't be doing the same. For my Resto Druid, for example, swapping out the Wild Growth glyph to have Glyph of Rejuvenation is a big difference on Anubarak. Also, not joining this community is like being left out in the cold, so come sit by the warm toasty fire and subscribe to the channel. My second best tip for TOC is to use all the tools available. Sure, a lot of us have fond memories of not playing WoW with 9 monitors and 45 add-ons, but the reality is that add-ons make getting the tribute chest a whole lot easier. I've compiled some of the best tools I've found to keep your run at 0 wipes, and I've put them in my document below the video. The first is the Thames TOC pack. There's really no pug that'll be clearing TOC without a weak aura pack for their healers. Making sure your healers get a pack like the Thames weak aura pack for penetrating gold should be your main priority. Also, weak aura packs are really useful for announcing debuffs on fights like Northrend Beasts and Jaraxxus. My second add-on recommendation is Plater. If anyone in your raid doesn't have a nameplate add-on yet, you should really get that fixed as soon as possible. Plater is a huge game changer for me on fights like Faction Champions. Once I was able to see all the nameplates, it really made dispelling Bloodlust a whole lot easier. More importantly though, I was able to spam out crowd control like crazy. My third add-on recommendation would be Method Raid Tools. I really feel like people always forget how strong Method Raid Tools is for tracking cooldowns. Sure, a lot of raid leaders use it, but normal raiders should be using it too. Being able to track battle res and intervade is huge, especially to maximize your healer mana. Instead of wildly asking for a bop while you're getting reamed on Faction Champions, you could just be asking individual paladins and avoiding terrible deaths. I've also noticed that most pugs aren't nearly as coordinated with Divine Sacrifice or Aura Mastery like they were in Ulduar. Setting a rotation for every fight and minimizing raid damage is highly recommended. Moving into some external tools, we have Warcraft logs. One huge key to getting the clear with 50 attempts remaining is learning how to analyze Warcraft logs. All your groups should be live logging, and you can quickly analyze logs even between wipes. I could make an entire video on just analyzing Warcraft logs to improve DPS and performance. But for our 50 attempts goal, we mainly want to focus on death. For example, on Twin Valkyrs, we can analyze Warcraft logs data to see exactly how many times melee got hit by the wrong color orb. With that kind of exact data, you can then go back to your raid and really clearly explain what needs to change. One downside of Warcraft logs, though, is that it can't can't really tell exactly why a penetrating cold target died. If you're a raid leader or you want things to go smoother, you should definitely be able to see the penetrating cold targets on your screen. Then you can use OBS and record a VOD, and then you can go back to it anytime between pulls. That way you can see exactly who was assigned to each penetrating cold target to fix things for next time. If you want to drill down into Warcraft logs data and really figure out what's going wrong, I do have some more tools that can help you to analyze it. The first is the Combat Log Analyzer from Shariva. It's a bit more complicated to set up since you need a Warcraft logs account, but you'll need a Warcraft logs account anyways to upload your logs, so I recommend making one. Once you import your raid log ID, you can drill into everything from consumable usage to casts per minute and also uptime. If that's too complicated for you though, a faster and simpler raid performance enhancer is Ironforge Pro. The log analyzer immediately lets you see who was buffed, who was pre-potted, all the basic stuff you want for successful pulls. This is a good way to see if your paladins, for example, are using the right consumables or not. Another recommendation on our 50 attempt journey is Wipefest. Again, you just put in the Warcraft logs raid ID and you can analyze pulls in really specific detail. On faction champions, for example, you can see who broke crowd control on faction champions, or you could see how many heals got off or how long totems stayed up. For example, if you know your average snowball kill time is 45 seconds, you could aim for 35 seconds during your next raid. They do mention all over the site that you need to subscribe, but I never needed to, and hopefully that doesn't change anytime soon. One last tool I've been using lately is WoW Analyzer. You can use this to analyze specific DPS in your raid and track things like spell time and rotations. It's not perfect, but I was able to quickly see how many incorrect spells I was casting on my boom cannon. Fixing that was a near immediate DPS increase. You can also drill into every death on a fight and see exactly what cooldowns were available for what player, which is really useful. Alright, so let's get to the number one most important tip to maximize your tribute chest. That tip is to fix your healers. The biggest reason your groups are going to wipe in TOC is unfortunately the healers. This is the ultimate healer raid where a single mistake will cost you those 272 cloaks. The big thing you need is healing assignments for every fight. That's everything from beacon assignments to who's assigned the raid healing. Then you need to use the analyzer tools from earlier in the video to make sure people actually follow the assignments. One thing I did when I was struggling was that I talked to our main tank and I asked him a bunch of questions about the best time to use things like pain suppression. That helped us to get better in sync and understand when to use each cooldown. I also recommend walking through phase 3 of Anubarak and really planning out the rotation each healer will give on their penetrating cold target. Having each healer verbally explain what they plan to do when their target gets penetrating cold is the best way. Using rejuvenation on my target was just ticking too slowly at first, and I was losing my target sometimes on the druid. I also found I didn't have enough reaction time or haste on my paladin to save targets. Because of that, I switched to Holy Shocking First Global, and that saved my target every single time. Overall though, the best strategy we found was to have your 5 penetrating cold healers, and then your resto druid just blast all the targets with rejuve after saving their own target. Once we started doing that, we basically never lost a penetrating cold target ever again, though you'll never lose the number 1 spot on the DPS meters if you check out my newly updated Phase 3 DPS tier list. Check that video out next for big damage.